The restaurant was full, every table taken, every chair pushed in at an angle that said money without trying. Nadia moved between them the way she always did, fast, quiet, carrying 3 plates on one arm and a smile on her face that cost her nothing and paid the bills. Her feet had stopped hurting 2 years ago. She didn't know if that was a good thing. She had been on her feet for 9 hours. The shift was supposed to end at 10. It was 11:40. Her coworker Danny had called in sick at 6 in the evening, which meant Nadia had absorbed his tables without a word, without extra pay, and without the option to say no. She needed the hours. She needed the tips. She needed the rent, which was due in 3 days, and the number in her bank account was not the kind that gave a person options. She moved to the corner table. Most of the staff avoided it when they could. Not because of the food, not because of the man seated there, but because of the way the air around that table felt different. Still, like the rest of the noise in the room, knew better than to travel in that direction. He had been sitting there for 3 hours. He had ordered mineral water and a single dish, eaten half of it, and spent the rest of the evening on his phone without looking up once. His name, Nadia did not know. She did not ask. She refilled his water. She asked if he needed anything else. He did not answer immediately, which was not unusual. She waited. She had learned to wait without fidgeting, without shifting her weight, without any of the small movements that said she had somewhere else to be. Then he looked up. He was not what she expected. He was somewhere in his 40s, with the kind of face that had learned to give away very little. Not cold, exactly. Still, the way a room goes still before something shifts in it. He said, "What do you want most?" She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Not for the table." He set his phone down. "In general, what do you want most? Right now, in your life?" She had been asked stranger things by men at tables. She had been asked for her number, her opinion on stock markets, whether she believed in fate, once whether she thought the soup was good enough to justify the price. She had answered all of them with the same professional warmth that said nothing at all. But something about the way he asked, flat, direct, no performance in it, made the usual answer feel wrong. She stood there with the water pitcher in her hand, and the noise of the restaurant running behind her, and she told him the truth. One sentence, tired, undecorated. She said, "I want to stop surviving and actually live." He looked at her for a moment, then he looked back at his phone. "Thank you," he said. "That's all." She refilled his glass and walked away. She forgot about it by the time she clocked out. She forgot about it on the bus home, her shoes off in her bag because her feet had started hurting again after all. She forgot about it when she checked her bank account in the dark of her apartment and did the math she had been doing every night for 4 months. The number was what it was. She set her phone face down on the mattress. She forgot about the man at the corner table entirely. Her name was Nadia Holt. She was 26 years old. She had grown up in a small town 2 states away, in a house that had too many people in it and not enough of anything else. She had come to the city at 18 with 1 bag, and the kind of confidence that only exists before life has had the chance to test it properly. The city had tested it. She was still here, which she counted as a win on most days. She had a sister named Claire who was 2 years younger and studying nursing on a scholarship that covered 60% of her tuition. Nadia covered the rest. She had a mother whose back had been bad for 3 years, bad enough that she couldn't stand at a register anymore, which was the only job she had ever known. Nadia sent money home when she could. When she could meant most months, stretched thin, the math always tight. She had no savings. She had no plan beyond next month, and even next month was blurry. She had told a stranger at a corner table the truest thing she knew about herself, and then she had gone home and set her alarm for 6:15 and closed her eyes. She did not know that the man at the table had watched her walk away and made a decision. She did not know that the decision had already been made before she finished her sentence. She did not know his name was Alexei Morov, or what that name meant to people in certain rooms in this city, or that asking people what they wanted most was something he had done for 20 years. Not as a game, not as a test exactly, more like a filter. He had learned, over time, that the answer to that question told him everything that mattered about a person. The ones who said money, the ones who said power, the ones who smiled and said they just wanted to be happy, the safe answer, the answer designed to please. He discarded all of them. The ones who told the truth, bare, flat, with no dressing on it, those were the ones he remembered. He had remembered very few. Nadia Holt, he thought, on the ride home. was one of them. He made a call. He said a name and an address. He said, find out what she actually needs. Not what she wants, what she needs. The person on the other end of the call did not ask questions. They never did. Nadia's alarm went off at 6:15. She hit it. She lay still for a moment with her eyes on the ceiling and ran the numbers again in her head, the way she did every morning, the daily ritual of knowing exactly how far she was from the edge. 3 days until rent. $640 short. She got up. She made coffee. She got dressed. She went back to work. She did not think about the man at the corner table. She did not think about him that day, or the next. On the third day, she woke up and found the envelope. It was on her kitchen counter, beside her keys, exactly where she always left her keys. The door had been locked when she came home the night before. She was certain of that. She always checked twice. The windows were locked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. There was simply an envelope that had not been there the night before, sitting on her counter like it had always belonged there. Inside it was a card, matte black, no logo, no name, no numbers printed on the front. On the back, in small clean text, a single line, for your use. She stood in her kitchen in her socks and held it and felt the particular kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. Someone had been in her apartment while she slept. They had come in, left this, and gone, and taken nothing. She stood there for a long time. Then she put the card on the table, sat down across from it, and stared at it the way you stare at something when you are trying to decide if it is a gift or a warning and you genuinely cannot tell. She called her building manager first. She asked, as casually as she could manage, whether anyone had been given access to her apartment in the last 24 hours. A maintenance check, a plumber, anything. The building manager said no. She asked whether the master key had been signed out. He said he would check. He called back 11 minutes later and said no, it had not. She thanked him and hung up. She called her sister next, not to tell her, just to hear a voice that was familiar. Claire talked about her clinical rotation for 12 minutes. Nadia said, in the right places. When Claire asked if she was okay, Claire said she should sleep more. Nadia said she would try. She hung up and looked at the card again. It had not moved. She had not expected it to. She spent 2 hours on her phone trying to find out what it was. She typed descriptions into search engines. She looked up private banking accounts, black card programs, membership accounts that had no public-facing sign-up page. She found forums where people talked about cards like this, in the kind of careful, hushed language, usually reserved for things that could not be confirmed, but could not be dismissed either. A friend from the restaurant, a man named Colin who had worked the bar for 6 years and knew more about the city's money than most people who actually had it, came over that afternoon. She showed him the card without explaining how she got it. He turned it over twice. He set it down on the table and leaned back in his chair. He said, "Do you know what this is?" She said she did not. He said, "I've heard about these. Not seen one. Heard." He tapped the table with 2 fingers. "Private account. No limit that anyone knows about. The bank that issues these doesn't advertise. You can't apply for one. You either have one or you don't." He paused. "Someone gave this to you?" She said, "Someone left it." He looked at her for a moment. "Left it where?" She pointed at the counter. The silence after that was a specific kind of silence, the kind that happens when someone understands that the conversation has just become about something larger than they came prepared for. Colin said quietly, "Nadia, who did you talk to recently?" She thought about the man at the corner table. She thought about the question he asked, and the answer she gave, and the way he had looked at her for exactly 1 moment before going back to his phone. She said, "No one." Colin went home at 4 o'clock. He said to be careful. She said she would be. She locked the door behind him and stood in the middle of her apartment and looked at the card on the table. She did not touch it that evening. She made dinner. She watched television without absorbing it. She went to bed early for the first time in weeks and lay on her back with the lights off and thought about what it meant that someone had walked into her home and left something worth more than she earned in a year and then walked out again. The thing that surprised her, the thing she did not expect and would not have predicted about herself, was that she was not afraid. She was something closer to alert, focused. The way she used to feel as a child when something happened that no one around her could explain, and she was the only one paying close enough attention to understand that an explanation existed, it just had not arrived yet. She fell asleep at 9:30, which was something she had not done in months. In the morning she got up, made coffee, and sat across from the card again. She picked it up. She looked at it. She set it back down. She went to work. The shift that day was the usual kind. Tables, orders, plates, smiles, the whole machinery of a busy restaurant turning over, without her needing to think about any individual part. She refilled the same kinds of glasses she always refilled. She answered the same kinds of questions. She split her tips with the busser and clocked out at 9 and took the bus home. The card was where she had left it. She stood in the kitchen and made the calculation she had been avoiding for 2 days. The calculation was not complicated. The rent was due. The number in her account was not sufficient. She had called her manager and asked for an advance and been told, kindly, that it was not something they did. She had thought about a short-term loan and looked at the rates and put her phone away. She picked up the card. She held it. She thought about the man at the table. She thought about what he had asked her and why, and the fact that he had not explained himself, had not handed her this directly, had not said a word about it. She thought about the fact that someone had entered her home without her knowing, and the only thing they had done was leave this. She put on her shoes. She went to the pharmacy on the corner, the one with the small cash machine near the back. She stood in front of the machine. She slid the card in. The machine did not reject it. It asked for a PIN. She stood there. She pressed 4 numbers, the ones that were easy, the ones she always used as a placeholder. The machine accepted it. A balance appeared on the screen. She stared at it for a long time, long enough that the man behind her cleared his throat. She withdrew enough to cover the rent. She stood on the pavement outside the pharmacy in the November cold and looked at the bills in her hand and felt something she did not immediately recognize. It took her a moment. It was relief. Not the shaky, temporary kind. Something steadier, the kind of relief that sits down in you and does not move. She walked home. She went to sleep. Over the following weeks, she was careful. She did not use the card the way someone might who had stopped being careful. She paid her rent. She cleared a medical bill that had been collecting interest for 8 months, the one she had stopped opening the envelopes for. She called her mother's doctor and asked what it would take to schedule the back surgery that her mother had been told she needed, and had been told, also, would cost more than she could afford. She got a number. She transferred it from the card's associated account using a routing number printed on a slip that had come folded inside the original envelope, which she had not noticed until she looked again. She paid for Claire's next semester before the invoice arrived. She did not buy herself a single thing that wasn't practical. She did not quit her job. She kept going to work. She kept taking the same bus. She kept eating the same grocery store meals she always ate. From the outside, nothing about her life looked different. From the inside, everything had shifted by exactly 1 degree. A single degree doesn't look like much, but a single degree, sustained, changes direction entirely. She was sleeping. That was the thing she noticed most. She was sleeping all the way through the night, every night, for the first time in 4 years. She hadn't known that was what she was missing until she had it. She hadn't known how much of her energy had been spent simply staying awake through her own anxiety, until the anxiety was gone. She still didn't know the man's name. She still hadn't tried to find out. She told herself it was because she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She was honest enough with herself to admit that this was only half true. The other half was something she didn't look at too closely. That knowing might make the whole thing feel more real than she was ready for it to feel. 3 weeks after she found the card, she was finishing a dinner shift when someone she had never seen before walked into the restaurant, walked past the host stand without acknowledging it, and stopped in front of her. He was a tall man in a gray coat. He was not there to eat. He had the particular posture of someone who had never waited for a table in his life. He handed her a small piece of folded paper. He said, "He wants to meet." He left before she could respond. She unfolded the paper in the staff bathroom. It was an address, a time 3 days from now, and nothing else. No name, no instruction, no option marked on it that said she could say no. She folded it up and put it in the pocket of her apron. She went back to the floor. She cleared a table and took an order and smiled at the right moments and did not think, very hard, about what she was going to do. She already knew what she was going to do. She had known from the moment she unfolded the paper. The knowing sat in her chest like something solid, not heavy, just there, present. She went home that night and slept 8 hours straight and woke up 5 minutes before her alarm and lay in the quiet of her apartment and thought, this is what it feels like to be ready for something. She had not felt ready for anything in a very long time. The address was in a part of the city she had driven past but never walked through, the kind of neighborhood that doesn't announce itself. No sign, no particular landmark, just a row of buildings that looked unremarkable in the way that only very deliberate design can achieve. She took the bus because she always took the bus, and she did not want anything about that morning to feel performed. She wore the same coat she always wore in November. She brought nothing with her except her keys and her phone and the folded piece of paper, which she didn't need but had kept. The building was 4 stories. The front door opened before she reached it. The man in the gray coat was there again. He said nothing. He led her to an elevator that required a card to operate. They went to the 3rd floor. He opened a door and held it without going in. She went in. It was not what she expected, though she was not certain what she had expected. A large desk and a view, maybe, the furniture of importance. Instead, it was a quiet room with a round table and 2 chairs and a window that looked at a courtyard, and Alexei Morov was already seated, his jacket folded over the back of his chair, his sleeves rolled to the forearm, reading something on his phone that he put down when she came in. He stood, briefly. He gestured to the 2nd chair. She sat. He said, "You used it." She said, "Yes." He said, "For what?" She told him. She didn't soften it, didn't dress it up, didn't present it as anything other than what it was. Her mother's surgery, her sister's tuition, the medical bill, the rent. She listed them the way she listed everything, factually, without emotion attached to the outside of the words. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he said, "Nothing for yourself." It wasn't a question. She answered it anyway. The rent was for myself. Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile. "Fair," he said. There was a moment of quiet, not uncomfortable, more like the pause before something begins in earnest. Then he told her who he was, not everything. Enough. He said it in the same flat, direct way she had answered his question in the restaurant, and she understood in the listening that this was something he did not do often, and that the doing of it was itself significant. He said his name was Alexei Morov. He said he ran operations across several sectors, some of which were legitimate and some of which were not, and that he was not going to pretend otherwise, or use language that softened what that meant. He said the city that she lived in, and the restaurants she worked in, and the apartment building she slept in, were all, in ways she might not be able to see directly, part of a structure that men like him maintained. He said it without drama. He said it the way someone says the weather will change, because it is true and worth knowing. She listened. She did not move away from it. He said, "I have people who are intelligent. I have people who are careful. I have people who are loyal." He looked at her steadily. "The thing I am missing is someone who tells me the truth, without calculating what the truth will cost them first. I am surrounded by people who have decided, before they open their mouths, what I want to hear. It is the most expensive problem I have, and nobody talks about it." She said, "That's a strange thing to need from a waitress." He said, "You're not a waitress. You're someone who has been doing that job. It's different." She looked at him. "What is it you think I am?" He said, "Someone who answers questions honestly when they're tired enough that performance is too much work." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What exactly would this involve?" He told her. He was specific. She would not be involved in anything operational. She would not carry anything, move anything, manage anything. She would attend certain meetings, sometimes as a visible presence, more often as a quiet one. She would listen. Afterward, she would tell him what she observed. Not what people said, but what she noticed underneath what people said. The gap between the two, he explained, was where every bad decision he had ever made had lived. He had spent 20 years building a system for reading people, and it had a flaw he had only recently identified. He trusted his own judgment too much. People who needed something from him told him what they thought he believed. He had become, without intending to, a man who heard only the version of reality that had been designed for his particular consumption. He needed a person who had no stake in any of it, who owed him something but not so much that they would lie to protect the debt, and who had already demonstrated, without being asked to demonstrate anything, that their first instinct was honesty. She said, "You're describing a kind of advisor." He said, "I'm describing something that doesn't have a name yet." She looked at the courtyard through the window. A pigeon landed on the edge of a bench and then left again. She said, "I want to know one thing." He waited. She said, "The card, the account, the surgery, my sister's tuition, was all of that part of deciding whether to offer me this?" He said, "Yes." She said, "What would you have done if I'd bought myself something expensive?" He said, "Nothing. I would have moved on." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "And if I say no to this?" He said, "The account stays active for 90 days. Then it closes. No consequences. No follow-up. You go back to your life." She looked at him. He was not a person who made spaces for other people's emotions. He was not warm in the way that was about performance. But there was something in the way he sat, the stillness, the absence of pressure, that she recognized. She recognized it because she had spent her entire adult life being that same thing for other people. Present, patient, available, the one who waited. She had never met anyone who extended it back to her. She thought about the apartment, the bus, the 9-hour shifts, the math she did every morning. She thought about sleeping through the night. She said, "I need 24 hours. He said, "No." She blinked. "No?" "You already know your answer," he said. "You knew it before you came in. Asking for time is something you're doing because you think it's what a careful person does. You don't need time. You need permission to say yes without it looking reckless." She stared at him. He was right. She hated that he was right. She would have hated it more if she were the kind of person who liked being wrong. She said, "Yes." He nodded. He reached across the table and slid a card toward her. This one had a number on it, a direct line, not routed through anyone. She understood without being told. He said there would be a person who would explain the practical details. He said she did not need to quit her job immediately, that in fact it was better if she didn't, that the restaurant was one of the rooms where she would continue to have access that others did not. He said, "One rule." She waited. He said, "You don't tell me what you think I want to hear. If you do it once, we're done. I'd rather hear something I don't like than something that isn't true." She said, "That's not a hardship for me." He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. She left the building at 11:20 and walked to the bus stop. The city was doing its usual thing around her, people and noise, and the particular relentless energy of a place that doesn't stop for individuals. She sat on the bench and waited for the bus and felt the particular quality of the quiet inside her. It was not the quiet of relief. She had felt that when she covered the rent, when she paid for her mother's surgery, when she cleared the debt. That was the quiet of a crisis resolved. This was different. This was the quiet of someone who has just turned to face the direction they were always supposed to be walking in. She took the bus home. She made a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter. She looked at the card with the direct number. She put it in the small drawer beside the sink where she kept the things she used regularly. She called her mother that evening. Her mother sounded better. The surgery had gone well. The recovery was on track. The doctor had said she might be able to stand for short periods within 6 weeks. Her mother talked for 20 minutes about the nurses and the hospital food and a daytime television show she had discovered, and Nadia listened and said yes in the right places and thought, "I did that." After she hung up, she stood in the kitchen in the dark for a while. Then she went to bed. She slept straight through until morning. The first 3 months were education without anyone calling it that. A woman named Helen arrived at Nadia's apartment the week after the meeting. Helen was somewhere in her early 50s with short silver hair and the manner of someone who had been useful to important people for so long that being useful had become simply who she was. She brought a laptop and a printed document and a thermos of coffee, and she sat at Nadia's kitchen table and explained the shape of Nadia's new life in the kind of precise, unhurried language that made the whole thing feel less like a revelation and more like a briefing. There were 4 things, Helen said, that Nadia needed to understand. The first was that her name would not appear anywhere, not on any document, not in any record, not in any conversation between anyone other than herself and Alexei. She was not an employee, she was not a contractor, she did not exist within the structure in any way that could be pointed at. The second was that she should behave exactly as she always had, same job, same apartment, same bus. This was not concealment for its own sake. It was because her access to certain rooms, certain conversations, Certain unguarded moments depended entirely on her being exactly what she appeared to be. The moment she changed her visible life, she changed what people said around her. That was the thing Alexei was paying for. He was not paying for her to become someone else. The third was that she reported only to Alexei, directly, through the number on the card. No intermediaries, no written records, nothing that could sit in an inbox or a file. The fourth was that if at any point she wanted to leave, she could. Helen was direct about this. There was no mechanism for keeping her. That was a feature, not an oversight. A person who stays because they cannot leave tells you nothing reliable. Nadia asked only one question. She asked what had happened to the person who had this role before her. Helen said there hadn't been one. This was new. Nadia sat with that for a moment. Then she said she understood, and Helen nodded, poured the last of her coffee, and left. The work began without announcement. That was the nature of it. She was not given cases or assignments. She simply continued to live her life, and the life now included doors that opened when they had not opened before. The restaurant remained the center of it, at least at the beginning. She had not understood, until she was looking for it, how many significant conversations happened in restaurants. Not in private dining rooms with closed doors, at regular tables, in the middle of the noise, because noise is a form of privacy when you know how to use it. Two men at the table near the window having what looked like a friendly dinner were deciding, without raising their voices, whether a third man could continue to be trusted. A woman who came in twice a week and always sat alone and always ordered the same thing was waiting, every visit, for a phone call she had learned not to look like she was waiting for. These were not things Nadia was told. These were things she watched. She had always watched. That was the thing Alexei had seen, she realized. Not a talent he had given her, but a talent she had always had, that had previously had nowhere to go. She called him every Thursday evening. The calls were never long. She told him what she had noticed. He listened. He asked questions that were always precise, never leading. He did not tell her what to look for in advance. He did not want her conclusions shaped by his interests before she reached them. After she gave him what she had, he said either, "Thank you," or "Tell me more," and nothing in between. She was 3 months in when the situation with the man named Owen Reeves began. Owen Reeves was a businessman. He was 43, pleasant-faced, the kind of man who laughed easily and made people around him feel that they were in good company. He had a financial relationship with Alexei's organization that had been in place for 5 years and that everyone involved considered stable. He came into the restaurant on a Wednesday evening with 2 people she didn't recognize, and they sat 2 tables from the kitchen, which was a loud table, the table nobody wanted, and Nadia noticed that he had chosen it himself when the host had offered him better options. She noticed that for the hour and 40 minutes they were there, he did not laugh once. Owen Reeves was a man who laughed easily. She had seen him in the restaurant 4 times in 3 months. He laughed at his own stories, at other people's stories, at things that weren't particularly funny. Laughter was the background sound of his presence, the way traffic is the background sound of a city. He sat for an hour and 40 minutes and did not laugh. She called Alexei that Thursday, a day early. She told him what she had seen. She described Owen's table choice, the 2 people he was with, the quality of the conversation, as she had been able to observe it from her peripheral vision while doing her job. She described the absence of the laughter. Alexei was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Anyone else would have told me about the 2 men he was with." She said, "I didn't recognize them. That's useful information for you, not for me." He said, "The laughter." She said, "Something changed for him. He's managing something he didn't have before. It's in his shoulders. He's working to look the same as he always looks, which means he's aware that someone might be watching. That's what the table choice was about. He wanted the noise." There was another silence. Then Alexei said, "Good." And then he said, "Don't go near him. Don't change anything. Keep your distance and tell me what you see." She did. Over the next 6 weeks, she observed Owen Reeves 3 more times. The laughter came back, slowly, but it had a different quality now. It arrived too quickly after the moment it should have arrived, the way someone laughs at a joke they'd already heard and are performing hearing for the first time. She reported this. She reported the way he ordered his food differently, switching from his usual to something lighter, which she knew because she had paid attention to what people ordered over time and had a sense of who each regular person was, in the way that good servers always do. She did not know what Alexei did with what she gave him. She had decided not to try to know. That was not her part of it. Her part was accurate observation, faithfully reported. What he did with it was his. But she was not naive. She knew the information she provided could have consequences for people. She knew that understanding that a trusted partner was behaving unusually might lead Alexei to make decisions about that partner. She knew what those decisions might look like at their most serious. She sat with that. She sat with it carefully and honestly, the way she sat with anything difficult. She was not a person who resolved moral discomfort by pretending it wasn't there. She let it be there. She let herself feel the weight of what she was part of, and she looked at it steadily, and she did not find a way to make it clean. It was not clean. She was not going to tell herself it was. What she found, instead, was this. She had spent her whole adult life working inside systems that did harm, and told themselves they were neutral. She had worked for employers who underpaid their staff, and called it market rates. She had paid rent to a building owner who kept the heat low in winter, and the maintenance slow in summer, and called it standard practice. The city she lived in ran on money that had come from places that did not bear close examination, and the restaurant she carried plates through every evening served people who made that money in ways she was not supposed to ask about. She was not discovering harm. She was discovering where she stood in relation to it. She had made her choice. She was going to do the part she was given well, honestly, without losing herself in it. That was the line she drew, not on paper, in herself, clearly, and she intended to keep it. Months became half a year. The work became familiar without becoming routine. Each thing she noticed was specific to its moment. She brought the same quality of attention to each one. She called Alexei every Thursday. She kept her job at the restaurant. She took the same bus. Her mother called on Sunday evenings. The back was better every week. Claire was doing well at school. She had been given a placement at a good hospital. She called Nadia sometimes just to talk, which was new, which meant she had enough room in her own life now to make space for other people. That was what money did when it arrived in the right amount at the right moment. It gave people room, not luxury, room. Nadia noticed she had stopped doing the morning calculation, the one she had done every day for years, the one where she ran the numbers and measured the distance between her and the edge. She had stopped doing it so gradually that she couldn't mark the exact day it stopped. She only noticed its absence, the way you notice later that a sound you've been living with for so long you stopped hearing it has gone quiet. She was not sleeping better. She was sleeping the way people sleep who do not need to manage their own fear before they close their eyes. That was a different thing entirely. She was 6 months in when she began to understand what she had become to Alexei, not what the role was in structure, what she was to him as a person. She understood it the way she understood most things, by watching, by noticing the small things that accumulated into a picture. He listened to her in a way that was different from how he listened to everyone else. She had seen him in 2 meetings now, attended as a quiet presence exactly as described, sitting at the edge of the room with a glass of water and a reason to be there that nobody thought to question. He was precise and fast, and his attention in those rooms was like a narrow beam of light. It landed on things and they became clear. He didn't miss much. But in their Thursday calls, he slowed down. He asked her to tell him again. He asked follow-up questions that came from genuine curiosity, not strategy. He was interested in how she saw things, not only in what she saw. She noticed, and she filed it, and she did not say anything about it. Not yet. The night that tested everything began on a Wednesday in April. Nadia had been at the restaurant for 6 hours when the room changed. She was near the kitchen when she felt it. Not a sound, not a visible event, but a shift in the air that she had learned, in the past several months, to pay attention to. She moved without hurrying. She cleared a table near the center of the room, and from that position she could see the entire floor. A man she had never seen before was seated at the table by the window. He had not made a reservation. She checked later and confirmed this. He had arrived during a brief moment when the host was occupied, taken a seat, and picked up a menu. He was in his late 50s, thin, with the quality of stillness that in her experience belonged to one of 2 kinds of people, the very patient or the very practiced. He ordered water and a main course. He ate slowly. He looked at his phone occasionally. He looked, to anyone watching casually, like a man having a quiet dinner alone. She watched him for 4 hours. He was not watching the door, which was what people who were nervous watched. He was watching the tables, specific ones. She tracked the path of his attention over the course of the evening and mapped the tables he returned to. She identified 3 of them. 2 she did not recognize. The third was a table she knew. It was Alexei's table. He was not there that evening, but 2 of the people he met with regularly were men she had been given no names for but whose faces she knew, whose patterns of arrival and departure she had logged in the journal she kept in a shorthand only she could read. She understood what she was looking at. She went to the back office at 9:15, told her manager she had a family call she needed to take, and stepped outside. She called the direct number. Alexei picked up on the second ring, which was unusual. He always let it ring longer. She said, "There is a man at the window table. He arrived without a reservation. He has been watching specific tables for 4 hours. One of the tables he's been watching is yours." Silence. Not the silence of surprise. The silence of someone who already has pieces of something and has just received another. He said, "Describe him." She did. Height as best she could estimate from having walked past his table twice. Build, coloring, the kind of shoes a person could identify a whole life from if they paid attention. A small mark on his left hand, visible when he had lifted his glass. Not quite a scar, something older and more deliberate. Alexei said, "Go back inside. Do not look at him again. Finish your shift. Go straight home." She said, "There's more." He waited. She said, "He paid attention to who went in and out of the back. Not the kitchen staff. He was tracking time. I think he was marking shift changes. I think he has been here before, maybe not as a customer, because the way he moved through the space was too comfortable. He knew where the blind spots were." A longer silence this time. He said, "Nadia." She had counted the times he had said her name in 6 months. 5. He used her name when what he was about to say had a different weight. He said, "Go home. I'll call you." She went back inside. She finished the last 40 minutes of her shift. She said goodnight to Colin and to the 2 other servers still on. She put on her coat. She walked to the bus stop and stood in the April cold and waited. The man from the window table came out of the restaurant at 9:50. He walked in the opposite direction. He did not look at her. She had expected that. People who were practiced did not look at things that were meant to be invisible. She was invisible. She always had been. It had always been a limitation. It had become, in 6 months, the most useful thing about her. She went home. She made tea. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone on the table in front of her and waited. Alexei called at 11:40. He said, "The man you described, we have a name. He is not from here. He was sent." He paused. "There is a situation that has been developing for 2 months that I thought I had managed. I was wrong. What you saw tonight tells me the timeline is shorter than I believed." She said, "Is it Owen Reeves?" Another pause. Longer. He said, "Yes." She had suspected, not from anything she had been told, from the way the threads had been running in her head since the night she noticed the shift in Owen's manner, since the Wednesday dinners where the laughter was performed, since the table near the kitchen chosen for its noise. She had felt the shape of it coming together without being able to name all the pieces. She said, "He was building something, quietly. He needed time to build it before he moved. That's why he went back to normal. He needed you to stop watching." Alexei said, "Yes." She said, "Did you stop watching?" He said, "I reduced it. I thought the risk was passing. It was a mistake." She waited. He said, "Tonight changed the position. They moved sooner than he planned, I think. Your observation may have collapsed a window they were counting on." She absorbed that. She sat with the weight of it, the knowledge that what she had noticed, and reported, had shifted something real. She did not know all the specifics of what had been planned or what moving sooner meant in practical terms, and she did not ask. Her line was still her line. But she was not going to pretend she didn't understand what she was part of. She said, "Are you safe?" He said, "Yes." Then, after a pause, "Are you?" She considered the question. It surprised her that he asked, not because she thought he didn't care, because asking it out loud was something she had not expected from him. She said, "I think so. I don't think I was identified tonight. I was a waitress clearing a table. That's all anyone would have seen." He said, "Good." And then, "This is going to take several days to resolve. I may need to call earlier than Thursday." She said, "All right." He said, "I want you to take 3 days off work." She said, "I don't want to change my pattern." He said, "I know. I'm asking you to, regardless." She said, "Is that a request or a direction?" He said, "It's a request. I don't give you directions." She thought about it. She said, 2 days. He said, 3. She almost smiled. She said, fine. 3. She took 3 days. She stayed close to home. She read, she cooked, she called Claire and listened to her talk about the hospital placement. She went for a walk each morning, the same one, because she was not someone who changed her habits out of fear, and she was not going to start. On the 3rd day, Alexei called in the afternoon and said the situation was resolved. He did not elaborate. She did not ask. She went back to work on Thursday. The restaurant was the same as it always was. She carried plates and refilled glasses, and smiled and tipped out the busser. Nothing about the room was different. She looked at Alexei's corner table, empty that evening, and she thought about everything she had seen from where she stood, and everything she had understood from what she had seen, and she felt something she did not have a precise name for. It was not pride, exactly. It was closer to the feeling of knowing that you are in the right position, that where you are is where you are supposed to be, not because someone told you, because the fit is evident. She had spent her whole adult life being in positions that were necessary but didn't fit. Jobs that needed doing, work she did well, situations she managed. She had never been somewhere that felt like it had been shaped around the particular way she saw the world. 6 months ago, a man had asked her what she wanted most, and she had answered truthfully, because she was tired, and had nothing left to spend on performance. She had told him she wanted to stop surviving and actually live. She had not known then what that looked like. She had only known what it didn't look like. On Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the night that had tested everything, Alexei came into the restaurant. He sat at the corner table. He ordered mineral water. He looked at his phone. After 30 minutes, he looked up when she arrived to refill his glass. He said, "What do you want most?" She looked at him. She understood what he was doing. He was asking the same question, the first question, the one that had started all of it. She stood with the water pitcher in her hand and the room running behind her, and she thought about it. She took longer than she had the first time, longer than she would have taken 6 months ago, when the answer was obvious because survival was the only horizon she could see. She said, "I want to keep going in this direction. I want to get better at what I do. I want the people I love to be okay." She paused. He waited. She said, "And I think I want to understand more about how things actually work, not the surface of it, the underneath." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "That I can help with." She refilled his glass and walked away. She went home that evening the same way she always went home. Bus, keys, apartment. She stood in the kitchen and made tea and did not look at the counter where the envelope had once been. She did not need to. She had stopped marking that distance a long time ago. She thought about what she had said, the underneath of things. She had always been drawn to it, to the gap between what was visible and what was real, between what people said and what they meant, between the story on the surface and the current running below it. She had spent 26 years observing that gap in grocery stores and bus stops and restaurant dining rooms, and she had never once been asked to use it for anything. She was being asked now. That was the thing she would not have been able to predict about her own life a year ago. Not the money, not the man in the corner, not any of the practical facts of how things had changed. Just this, that the specific way she had always seen the world, the particular attention she had always paid to things that other people moved past without noticing, turned out to be worth something to someone. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to her room. She set her alarm for 6:15, which she still did every morning from habit, and then she lay in the dark and thought about what came next. She did not know exactly what came next. 6 months ago, not knowing would have kept her awake. The uncertainty was a thing she had managed by running the numbers, by calculating what could go wrong and in what order, by preparing for each version of bad. Tonight she lay in the dark, and did not know what came next, and was not afraid of it. That, she thought, was the real answer to the question. Not the version she had given at the table. That was true, but it was the surface truth. The underneath of it was this. She had spent her whole adult life afraid of what she didn't know. She had called it preparation, called it responsibility, called it taking care of the people who needed her to. She had been surviving, carefully, with her whole self pointed at the work of not falling. She wasn't falling anymore. She closed her eyes. She did not count anything. She did not run numbers. She let the quiet of the apartment be quiet, and the dark be dark, and the next day be something that would arrive when it arrived. She slept before she knew she had started. Outside, the city did its usual thing. noise and light, and the particular restless energy of a place that has no interest in the small hours of one person's life. She had lived in it for 8 years, and it had taken 8 years for the city to notice her back. It had taken one truthful sentence, on a tired night, to a man who had been waiting to hear one. She did not know what came next. She knew who she was. She knew what she could do. She knew what she refused to be. That was enough. For the first time in her life, it was actually enough.